She only wanted to help, but when she said, "I'm going to heal you," the millionaire lost control. "Are you playing with my son's life?" he shouted, and fired her on the spot, without even letting her explain. But what no one expected was that this wasn't the whole story. Nathan Caldwell heard them from 30 feet away, without context, without the weeks of trust that had built them, without any of the conversation that gave those words their actual meaning. He fired her that same night. No warning, no chance to explain. What he couldn't see, standing there in the cold with his jaw locked and his hands pressed flat against his thighs, was that those 4 words were the truest thing anyone had said inside his house since the accident. And the next 48 hours would cost him more than any mistake he had ever made. The Caldwell home sat at the end of a private drive in Ridgemont, a fictional suburb outside Hartford, Connecticut. 3 floors of glass and reclaimed timber. A stone fountain in the circular driveway that hadn't run in 3 years. Formal gardens kept perfect by a crew that arrived every other Thursday and never stayed long enough to feel what the inside of that house was like. 2 people lived there, a father and a son. They shared the same walls and almost nothing else. Nathan Caldwell was 41. He had run Caldwell Capital Partners, a private investment firm his father founded, and Nathan had tripled for 12 years. He had once been the kind of man who remembered every name at a business dinner and actually meant it when he asked how you were doing. He had a wife named Sarah, who said his smile could light up any room. He had a son named Eli, 6 years old, who ran through every hallway in that house with untied shoelaces and a laugh that arrived before he did. He had once a life that felt like itself. The accident happened on a Thursday in November, 3 years ago. Rain, a wet interstate, a delivery truck that ran a red light at 40 miles an hour because the driver had been awake 19 hours and was looking at his phone. Nathan was driving. Sarah sat beside him. Eli was asleep in his car seat in the back, his stuffed dinosaur pressed to his chest. The truck hit the passenger side. Sarah died before the ambulance reached them. Eli survived, but the damage to his lower spine was permanent. He would never walk again. Nathan walked away with a gash on his forehead and a wound somewhere internal that no doctor put in any report because medicine had no language for what it actually was. 3 years later, nobody ran through those halls. Eli spent his days in a motorized wheelchair, studying with private tutors, eating alone and playing video games for hours, building worlds on a screen because the real one had been closed to him carefully, firmly, and with nothing but love behind every locked door. His father managed the firm from the 3rd floor, rarely came down, controlled everything that entered and exited the house with the precision of someone who had decided that control and love were the same thing. The nutritionist-approved menu, the physical therapy schedule, the reading list, the television access, everything passed through him. Household staff turned over constantly. Nathan wasn't unkind, he was exact. And exactness, over time, exhausted people. Gerald Marsh had survived it all. 63, the household manager who had worked for the Caldwells since before Eli was born. He had watched Nathan transform from a warm, present father into this controlled 3rd-floor version who communicated with his son primarily through schedules. Gerald had stayed because leaving felt like one more abandonment, and that house had seen enough of those. The 3rd week of October, Premier Home Care Solutions sent their new candidate. Claire Morgan arrived at 8 in the morning exactly. 30 years old, dark hair in a practical ponytail, eyes somewhere between green and grey, that had the habit of looking at people like she was reading something written just below the surface of them. She carried her CNA certification, a letter of recommendation, and something that didn't appear on any form, the understanding, earned from years watching her own mother navigate serious illness, that the hardest wounds are never the visible ones, and the most important care is never listed in the intake paperwork. Gerald handed her the conduct guidelines, 4 pages, single-spaced. She read them without rushing. Paused at point 6. Under no circumstances is the caregiver to transport or accompany the minor off the property without written authorization from Mr. Caldwell. Read it twice. Then continued without comment, because she understood that asking about it now would be choosing the wrong battle at the wrong moment. She was hired. Her job was clear: assist Eli with his morning routine, ensure his physical comfort throughout the day, monitor his needs. She was not his tutor, not his entertainer, not in any professional sense his friend. That was the job as written. The first 2 days Eli ignored her with the deliberate thoroughness of someone who had learned that new people in this house were always temporary, And the correct response to temporary things was not to invest. On the third morning, while she helped him and he caught her looking at a model airplane kit on his shelf, still boxed, still in the shrink wrap, he spoke for the first time. "I don't build them," he said. "Why not? Small pieces, they could get lost." Claire looked at the kit, at the boy, back at the kit. "What do you do instead?" He studied her for a moment, deciding whether the question was worth answering. "Games," he said. "What kind?" he told her. And Claire, whose 12-year-old nephew talked about video games with the intensity other people reserved for their beliefs, asked exactly the right follow-up. Eli answered. She asked another. He answered faster, with less calculation behind it. That conversation lasted 9 minutes, but something moved in that room, slow and careful, like a window being eased open in a house that had forgotten what outside air smelled like. The second week brought the first test. Claire found, pushed to the back of Eli's closet shelf, a set of professional watercolor supplies. Brushes still sealed, paper pad untouched, a wooden box of paints that had never been opened. "My grandmother sent them," Eli said, before she could ask. "I can't use them. They might spill. What if we put down a drop cloth? Dad won't go for it. Would it be all right if I talked to Gerald about it?" Gerald, when she found him, was quiet for a moment long enough to mean something. "The sunroom," he said finally. Plastic sheeting on the floor, finished before Mr. Caldwell's 4 o'clock calls. That afternoon, for the first time in 3 years, Eli painted. Not anything specific, color moving across paper the way a child's hands move when they've stopped thinking about the result and started thinking only about the making of it. Claire sat 8 feet away and didn't speak for 20 minutes and felt something open in that room the way rooms open when someone finally exhales. When Nathan came down at 6 and caught the faint smell of paint in the hallway, he stopped. "Gerald, Eli painted this afternoon in the sunroom, sir. Plastic sheeting was down, no damage of any kind." Nathan walked to his son's door, slightly open. Inside, Eli was asleep with the game controller loose in his hand. Leaned against the wall was a large sheet of watercolor paper, blue and orange and a green that might have been water, or a field or something only Eli could name. Nathan stood in the doorway, said nothing, closed the door gently, and went back upstairs. But the next morning at the breakfast table, there was a new set of sable brushes, professional quality, next to Eli's glass of orange juice. No note, no explanation, just the brushes. Eli picked them up, looked at them for a moment, and ate his entire breakfast without being reminded once. First time in weeks. Claire held on to that. Nathan Caldwell loved his son. That was not in any doubt. The problem was the architecture of that love, how it had learned to move, always from behind, always without contact, always like someone leaving something at a door and disappearing before it could open. The first real confrontation between Claire and Nathan came the third week. Claire had proposed through Gerald that Eli be allowed 1 hour in the backyard, private property, fully enclosed, flat grass, afternoon sun. The response came the next morning in Nathan's compressed handwriting. "The path near the back fence has uneven ground. The chair could tip. This isn't authorized. NC." Claire read it twice, breathed through it, and went to the 3rd floor. Nathan looked up from his screen with the expression of someone who hadn't expected to be interrupted. "What do you need?" "I'd like to talk about the yard." I already answered. "I know. That's why I came in person. Because I think this deserves a real conversation." He looked at her with the full attention he'd been withholding since she arrived. His eyes were dark and deeply tired, carrying something that wasn't from this week, but from 3 years of not sleeping the way people sleep when they're at peace. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 3 weeks. "And you already know better than I do what my son needs." Not a question, a warning. "I don't know better than you," Claire said, not retreating, not escalating. "But I'm with Eli every day while you work, and I can tell you he needs to feel wind on his face for 1 hour, not a field trip, just the yard. I'm not asking you to trust me without reason. I'm asking you to trust that I want exactly what you want for him." Nathan held her gaze for 5 seconds that felt like 10. "Monday," he said finally. "Gerald present the whole time, 30 minutes. Grass only, not the path." "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." She left. He returned to his screen. 4 full minutes passed before he started typing again. Monday, Eli spent 45 minutes in the backyard. Nathan never appeared, but the curtain on the 3rd floor window moved twice while they were out there. Several weeks later, a Wednesday afternoon, Claire was folding laundry when she heard Eli's chair stop in the doorway. She turned. He sat with his arms resting in his lap and something on his face she hadn't seen from him before, not blank, not guarded, something more exposed. Do you think it was my fault? No preamble, no lead-in. The way children ask things they've been holding too long. Claire set down what she was holding. What thing? The accident. My mom dying. She crossed the room and sat in the nearest chair, putting herself at his eye level. What makes you think that? They were coming to pick me up, Eli said. I was at a birthday party. If I hadn't asked to go, if you hadn't gone, Claire said carefully, maybe that truck still hits their car somewhere else, some other night. Maybe it doesn't. Nobody can know what would have happened on a different road, nobody. But the reason they were out there was me. The reason they were out there, she said, is that they were your parents. And parents drive to pick up their kids from birthday parties every day without thinking twice, because that is what parents do. There is nothing you could have done to deserve what happened. Eli looked at the ceiling. She had learned that was where he looked when he was thinking something difficult. Dad doesn't think it was my fault either, he said after a moment. But he doesn't talk about any of it. Sometimes I just want to know if he misses her, or if he moved on and I just don't know. Something pulled tight in Claire's chest. I'm almost certain he hasn't moved on, she said quietly. People we love don't disappear from inside us. It's just that sometimes missing someone hurts enough that we stop talking about them, even though we think about them every hour. Did you ever lose anyone? My mom, when I was 22. Did she disappear from inside you? No, but I learned to carry her differently. How? That takes time, Claire said, and you don't figure it out alone, you figure it out with someone next to you. That night, Nathan came downstairs to check on Eli. The room was dark. Eli was asleep. On the nightstand, instead of the game controller, was the stuffed dinosaur that had been sitting untouched on the closet shelf for 3 years. Nathan stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he stepped back into the hallway, sat down against the wall and stayed there until Gerald passed by and found him in the dark. Need anything, sir? No. Thank you, Gerald. Gerald walked on. But he understood, in the wordless way of someone who has been paying close attention for a decade, that Nathan Caldwell had been crying, quietly, in the way of someone who has been carrying the full weight alone so long he no longer believes there's another way. December arrived cold and grey, and with it the proposal that made Gerald go quiet longer than usual. The beach, Claire said. No. One day, one Saturday, there's a fully accessible beach 2 hours from here. I researched it. Eli turns 10 in January. He hasn't seen the ocean since the accident. Mr. Caldwell won't approve that. Let me ask him myself. Claire, Gerald, that boy needs to see something larger than these 4 walls. Gerald held her gaze for a long, measured moment. That's your conversation, not mine. Claire went to the 3rd floor, knocked, entered. Nathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, 10 seconds of silence. No, he said. Why? 2 hours on the highway. Sand. Uneven terrain I can't assess in advance. Nathan. He looked up. First time she'd used his given name. Since the accident, she said quietly, completing the sentence he hadn't finished. That's where you were going. His posture shifted. Not outward. Not visible to anyone who wasn't watching carefully. Something interior. Your professional role does not extend to questioning my decisions about my son, he said. You're right, said Claire, and I need you to hear me anyway. Eli didn't only lose his mother that night, he lost sidewalks, sunlight, the ocean, the chance to have a bad day somewhere that isn't his bedroom. You are protecting him from everything, Nathan. And there is a real difference between protecting someone and removing the world from them entirely. The silence that followed was the most loaded one Claire had experienced in that house. Please leave, Nathan said. She left. She didn't sleep easily that night, thought about whether she had pushed past the line, about how much that job had come to matter in ways that went beyond any boundaries she knew how to name, about how that was always what happened when someone let themselves get genuinely involved. The next morning, Gerald appeared with an envelope. Inside, 1 sheet. Nathan's handwriting. Saturday the 14th. I'm going too. NC. Claire read it 3 times. Saturday the 14th of December. All 4 of them left at 7 in the morning. Nathan at the wheel, Gerald in the passenger seat. In the back, Eli next to Claire, with his window cracked despite the cold because he wanted the air moving. The first 90 minutes were mostly silence. 40 minutes in, Eli said, What's it called? Blue Harbor State Beach, said Claire. Is it nice? Never been. We'll find out together. What if I don't like it? Then you say so. What if I do? You say that too. A pause, then quietly toward the front. Dad, Have you been? Nathan took a moment. Once, he said, with your mum, before you were born. Was it nice? Very, Nathan said. Nothing else. But in the rearview mirror, Claire watched his hands ease on the wheel, knuckles going from white to normal, like something releasing that had been held a long time. Blue Harbor was everything its name suggested. Pale sand, patient Atlantic swells, a wooden boardwalk with a proper accessible ramp, few visitors on a cold December Saturday, the sound of the ocean steady and unhurried, as if it had been here before everything, and was in no rush. When the wheelchair reached the end of the ramp and Eli saw the ocean for the first time in 3 years, he went completely still. Nobody spoke. Wind off the water, salt in the cold air. It's really big, Eli said finally. Yeah, said Claire. Can we go closer? Nathan assessed the route, the ramp grade, the packed sand near the waterline, the gentle slope, the chair on wet ground. He calculated everything visible. Slowly, he said. The four of them moved toward the water, Claire guiding the chair, Nathan one step behind ready, even though there was nothing to be ready for. When the first wave washed up and reached Eli's feet, the boy made a sound that wasn't a shout and wasn't a laugh, but somewhere between them, something that needed both lungs and had been waiting a long time to come out. It's freezing, he yelled. December is cold everywhere, Claire called back, laughing. And then Nathan did something unplanned, unannounced, undecided. He sat on the boardwalk step, pulled off his shoes and socks, rolled his pants to the knee and walked into the water beside his son. Just walked in, the way you do something you've been afraid of when you stop thinking about the fear long enough to simply move. Eli stared at him. What are you doing? I genuinely don't know, Nathan said, and he sounded like himself, the old version, the one from before. Eli looked at his father standing in December Atlantic water in his dress pants and laughed. The real one, the hallway laugh. The one from before everything changed. Nathan turned toward the horizon so nobody could see what was happening on his face. Claire picked up a smooth shell from the wet sand and placed it in Eli's hand without a word. They ate lunch on the boardwalk. Sandwiches Claire had made before dawn, hot cocoa in thermoses, and the chocolate she'd packed even though it wasn't Sunday. Technically against the rules, Eli said. Technically a field trip, Claire said. Field trip rules are different. Nathan looked at her from across the bench in the way he sometimes did when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She was helping Eli with the foil wrapping with that practicality of hers that never looked like effort. She had a smear of cocoa on her wrist she hadn't noticed. He looked back at the ocean before it became something that needed a name. After lunch, while Gerald dozed against the railing and Nathan answered messages a short distance away, Eli turned toward the water and said to Claire, barely above the sound of the waves, I think my mom would have liked this. Why do you think so? Because she always wanted to go places. Dad was the one who didn't. She'd convince him eventually. A pause. Kind of like you did. Who convinced you? Eli thought about it. You did, and then you had to convince someone else. Your dad? Yeah. Quiet for a moment. Claire, I know you don't have any special powers or anything, but when you're around, things feel less heavy. Claire felt something in her chest that had no official name, but felt like the most important thing she'd heard in a long time. Things feel lighter when you're not carrying them alone, she said. That's the only real thing. There's no other kind of magic. Eli nodded, satisfied, the way children nod when they've confirmed something they already suspected. Are you going to stay? He asked. Or are you going to leave like the others? She didn't answer immediately. That question deserved honesty. I don't know, she said finally. What I know is that while I'm here, I won't be halfway about it. Eli leaned back in his chair. The sun was dropping toward the tree line. The waves kept coming in, slow and steady, the way they always did. Claire watched him for a moment, this boy who had carried so much for so long, and felt something settle inside her chest. She looked at him the way you look at someone when you've already made a decision you haven't said out loud yet. And then she smiled, softly, almost to herself. I'm going to heal you, you know, she said quietly. Not your legs. That's the doctor's work. But the other part, the part inside. What Claire did not know was that Nathan, who had finished his messages and was walking back toward them, heard exactly those words from 30 feet away. Just those words, without everything that had built them. I'm going to heal you. He stopped. Those 4 words didn't land as what they were. They landed as the memory of the specialist in Boston who had sat across from him 16 months after the accident and said, carefully, devastatingly, that with the right intervention, Meaningful, functional recovery was possible. They landed as the testimonials he'd read at 3 in the morning in the first year, crying in front of his laptop, believing what he needed to believe, until the pediatric neurologist said to him directly, without softening it, "There is no recovery to pursue here, Mr. Caldwell. I'm going to heal you." Something cold moved through him that had nothing to do with December. The drive home was tense in a way only he understood. Monosyllables when Eli spoke, rigid posture. Claire noticed the shift, but couldn't read it yet. When they arrived and Gerald took Eli to his room, Nathan asked Claire to stay. "What did you say to my son at the beach?" His voice was level, the specific level that lives just before something loses the ability to hold itself together. "Several things. Which part are you asking about?" "I'm going to heal you." "Did you say that?" Claire understood immediately, and understood exactly how it had sounded from 30 feet away, without the conversation that had come before it. "Mr. Caldwell, that wasn't— Did you promise my son he will walk again?" "No," she said, clear and steady. "I told him I was going to help him heal emotionally. I was not talking about his legs." "But that's what he heard." Nathan's voice fractured, barely, just enough to see the crack. He pulled it back together, and the effort of pulling it back was more frightening than if he had simply broken. "Do you know how many times he has been given impossible promises? Do you know how many nights I found him crying because someone said what he wanted to hear and it turned out to be nothing?" His voice rose, not a shout but something worse, something stripped down to the bone, the voice of a man who has been holding a wall up for 3 years and can feel it starting to give. "Do you have any idea what it is to sit across from your 6-year-old son and watch him understand, fully understand in real time, that he is never going to walk again? Do you know what that looks like on a child's face?" "Nathan, no." The word came out hard. He stopped, jaw tight. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, but the fracture in it was wider, and somehow that was worse than anything louder would have been. "My son is not anyone's healing project. He is not a case study. He is my son. He is the only thing I have left, and I will not let anyone give him hope they cannot deliver, no matter how much good they think they're doing. That is my job. It has been my job for 3 years, and I am not going to apologize for it." "You heard 4 words, Claire said, and her voice trembled slightly but did not yield. 4 words, with no context, no conversation, nothing that came before them. And you decided you knew exactly what I meant." A pause. "Is that how you protect him? On 4 words and a worst-case assumption?" The silence landed like something physical. "I need you to collect your things tomorrow," Nathan said. His voice was back under control. That was somehow the worst part, how quickly it went back under control. "I'll pay the full month plus 2 weeks. Gerald will have everything ready." Claire looked at him for 3 long seconds, not with anger, with something harder to sustain than anger. "You're making a mistake," she said. "It's mine to make," he said. "Good night." She left that night with the same bag she'd arrived with and the difficult, clean certainty that she had done nothing wrong, even if she couldn't prove it yet. The next morning was the worst in that house in a long time. Eli came to the kitchen at 7 expecting Claire, and found Gerald alone at the stove. The old man took a moment to answer when the boy asked for her. "She's not going to be coming back, Eli." Eli said nothing. He sat in the kitchen doorway for a stretch of time Gerald couldn't measure. Then he turned his chair and went back to his room without eating. Nathan came down at 9. Was told. Went to his son's door. Closed. Eli. Silence. "Can I come in?" Nothing. He opened the door. Eli sat facing the window, back to the room. The stuffed dinosaur was on the floor, not where it usually lived. "Eli, I need you to understand that something happened. You fired her. Flat. No tears. That was the hardest part. There was something she said that wasn't, you fired her because you heard something you didn't understand. The flatness wasn't coldness. It was the voice of someone who has spent hours thinking and moved past the stage of being surprised by anything. She told me she was going to help me heal on the inside. Not my legs, Dad. Inside. She said what I carry here." He touched his chest without turning around. "Could get better, too." Nathan said nothing. "Did you know I thought the accident was my fault? For 2 years." Silence. "Did you know I thought you were ashamed of me? That is absolutely— Did you know there was one specific night, about a year ago, when I thought it would have been better if it had been me instead of Mom?" Nathan felt the floor move in a way that had nothing to do with the floor. Eli's voice didn't shake. It was the voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation so many times inside his own head that saying it aloud had lost its power to frighten him. And that The fact that he'd been alone with it long enough to rehearse it was the most devastating thing Nathan had heard in 3 years. Eli never, not for 1 second. I know, the boy said. Claire helped me understand that. She helped me understand that you love me, but you're scared. That you don't talk to me because it hurts you too, and I worked hard at believing that. A pause, clean, unforced, and then you fired her because you heard 4 words and decided you already knew. Nathan walked to the window. He sat on the edge of Eli's bed at eye level with the chair. Eli turned around. "What do you want me to do?" Nathan asked. His voice had nothing performing in it, just sound, just a question from someone who genuinely didn't know the answer. "Tell her you're sorry," Eli said, "and ask me how I'm actually doing, not whether I ate, not whether I finished my work, how I'm actually doing." Nathan looked at his son, 9 years old, Sarah's eyes, Nathan's stubborn jaw, carrying things alone that no child should carry, protecting his father from his own pain because he thought his father had enough already. "How are you doing, Eli?" Nathan said. Eli looked at him for a moment. "I miss Claire," he said, "and I miss Mom. And sometimes I miss the kid I used to be, but today I feel a little less broken than yesterday." A pause. "How about you?" Nathan took his time. "A little less broken too," he said, "but I need some time." "Okay," said Eli, "but call her first." 2 full days passed before Nathan picked up the phone. He needed every hour, needed to stop being angry at himself long enough to form real words. To admit, alone in his office at 11 at night with a cold cup of coffee beside his keyboard, that he had made exactly the kind of mistake made by people whose fear of being wrong is the very thing that makes them wrong. He called on a Wednesday afternoon. She answered on the second ring. "This is Nathan Caldwell," he said. A brief pause. "I know," she said. "I owe you an apology. I heard 4 words without context, assumed the worst, and let you go without giving you any chance to explain. I hurt you, and I hurt my son." Claire didn't respond right away. "How is he?" she asked. "Better than I expected. He talked to me. I'm glad." Claire, her name without the distance, for only the second time. "What you did for Eli in those months, I wasn't able to see it until it was gone. And what you did for me, even though it wasn't your job, wasn't in any description. I saw that too. I just took too long to admit it." Silence on the line. "What did you see?" she asked quietly. "That I was so focused on protecting him that I forgot to be present with him," Nathan said. "That there's a difference between those 2 things I didn't want to look at, and that being in the same house as someone isn't the same as being there for them." Claire let out a slow breath. "Nathan, would you come back?" It came out before he finished forming it. "To work?" she asked. "Yes, and to finish what you started. With Eli." A moment of silence that Nathan felt in his chest. "That doesn't only depend on me," she said. "It depends on whether you're actually willing to do things differently." "I am," Nathan said. "Or at least, I'm willing to try." "Then yes," said Claire. "I'll come back." Claire returned the following Monday. Gerald met her at the door with an expression that, on his face, was indistinguishable from deep relief. Eli waited in the hallway with his arms crossed, and a studied air of cool indifference that she found completely wonderful. "You're back," he said. "I'm back. Are you going to make that chicken soup again? Is that your welcome?" "It's a reasonable question." "This week," Claire said. Nathan greeted her briefly, with more awkwardness than coldness, which she counted as genuine progress. There was a moment in the kitchen when he asked if she wanted coffee, and she said yes, and both of them stood slightly too long watching the machine. "Thank you for coming back," he said, not looking at her. "Thank you for calling," she said. Also not looking at him, that was all. But it was enough for both of them to go back to their separate spaces, carrying something lighter than what they'd started the morning with. The weeks that followed were different in ways that built slowly. Nathan came down for dinner more nights than not. Ate quickly at first, like someone expecting to be asked to leave, then stayed longer. Eli discovered that mentioning his game produced questions from his father. Wrong questions, badly framed, missing entire concepts, but questions. That mattered more than the accuracy. One evening, Claire carried 3 plates to the dining room and found Nathan and Eli in a heated debate about strategy for a boss encounter. Nathan had his phone out, looking things up with the focus of a man who had decided this was the most important research happening anywhere in the world. Claire set the plates down without interrupting. Sat, ate her soup, didn't hide her smile. There were also the other moments, the ones between her and Nathan that neither of them named. Moments when their eyes held a second too long and both looked somewhere else at the exact same instant. moments in the kitchen when he handed her something, and their hands touched briefly, and neither said anything, but the silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. Moments when she caught herself wondering if he noticed those silences too, and told herself that wasn't the point, and then noticed she was smiling slightly when she heard him on the stairs coming down for dinner. Gerald observed both of them with the patience of someone who has learned over a long career to distinguish between what is temporary and what is not. In January, Nathan and Claire made their first genuinely joint decision, enrolling Eli in Westfield Academy, a fictional private school 40 minutes away, full accessibility, trained inclusive staff, small classes, and most importantly, other children. "What if it doesn't go well?" Nathan asked. "What if it does?" Claire answered. He looked at her for a moment. "We try," he said. The first 2 weeks went well. Eli came home quiet, but not sad, and gradually started mentioning names. Jamie, who lent him a pencil without making anything of it. Marcus, who had strong opinions about video games and stated them without being asked. The Wednesday of the 3rd week, Claire's phone rang. It was the school. Eli had fallen from his chair during the lunch break. He was in the nurse's office. She called Nathan before she finished processing it. He was in a call but picked up on the first ring. "It was a fall," she said. "They're with him." "We don't know yet. I'm on my way," Nathan said, and hung up. 20 minutes. Claire arrived 5 minutes after Nathan, found him standing in the hallway outside the nurse's office, both hands pressed deep into his coat pockets, shoulders near his ears. "How is he?" "Waiting for assessment." His voice was controlled, too controlled. She knew that voice now. "Nathan," she said, "I'm fine. You're not, and you don't have to be." He looked at her, and she saw what lived underneath the control. Not coldness, not distance, but the panic of someone who feels everything simultaneously and has nowhere to put any of it. "If something happened to him." "Something happened," she said. "He fell. That's different from what you're thinking. What if sending him there was wrong? Would you still be asking that if you hadn't sent him and he'd spent another year alone in that house?" Nathan didn't answer, looked at the floor. Then quietly, "I feel like you should be hearing this from me, not the other way around." "You will be," Claire said. "Next time." And without either of them deciding to, Nathan put his back against the wall, and Claire stood beside him, both of them watching the closed door. Their arms touched. Neither moved. The school nurse came out 15 minutes later with a calm expression that visibly took years off Nathan's face. Bruised elbow, scrape on his hand, nothing structural. "He's shaken but fine. He's been asking for his dad and for Claire." Nathan closed his eyes for 2 seconds. When they walked in, Eli was on the examination table with his arm bandaged, making an effort to look less frightened than he clearly was. "It wasn't my fault," he said immediately. "Marcus bumped into me, but I don't think he meant to." "Are you okay?" Nathan asked, his voice carrying something it hadn't before, something smaller and more real than control. "My elbow hurts." "Are you taking me out of the school?" Nathan paused. "No, do you want to stay?" "Yeah, Marcus is a lot, but I think we might actually become friends." Nathan looked at his son for a long, steady second. "Then you stay." Claire stood in the doorway, giving them room. Eli spotted her and waved her over. "Did you bring emergency chocolate?" She gave him a serious look. "Do you think I had time to think about chocolate when the school called me?" "No, but I was hoping anyway." "Same," she said. And Nathan, watching the two of them from the corner of that fluorescent-lit room, felt something he hadn't expected to feel that afternoon, that this imperfect, unplanned, slightly frightening moment was genuinely, unmistakably good. The weeks that followed were about building, slow, imperfect, real. Marcus turned out not to be too much, but simply very direct, and his friendship with Eli became the most natural thing that had happened in that household in years. They argued about games with the commitment other kids gave to sports rivalries. He came over Saturdays. He and Eli disappeared into the game room for hours, while Nathan sat in the living room and listened to the noise they made and let them. One Friday in February, Nathan went to the school alone, not to pick Eli up, just to see. He sat on a bench near the courtyard for 12 minutes, watching his son play chess with Marcus at a table by the window. Eli said something. Marcus laughed loud enough that Nathan could hear it through the glass. That sound. 3 years since he had heard that sound. When Eli spotted him on the way out, he frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Came to see you. Did you like what you saw?" "Yes," Nathan said. No hesitation. Eli nodded, the nod of someone filing away important information. "You can come back," he said, "but don't distract me." Nathan smiled. Small. Real. The same one Sarah said could light up any room she'd ever stood in with him. Their first real conversation, person to person, nothing professional, happened on a Thursday night in the kitchen. Late. Eli asleep. Gerald gone. They found themselves there without having planned it. She was getting water. He was looking for a reason to be somewhere other than his empty office. They talked for close to 2 hours. She told him about her mother, the years of caregiving when the illness became serious, about learning that the love caregivers give becomes invisible because it's practiced in silence and spent without anyone seeing it go. He told her about Sarah, not the accident, not the version everyone knew, but the ordinary things, that she sang badly and happily while she cooked, that she always left her keys in the refrigerator for a reason neither of them ever solved, that the last time they laughed together was in the car, 10 minutes before everything changed. "Do you miss who you were?" Claire asked. "Before? I miss not being afraid," Nathan said. "I miss the version of me who didn't calculate everything first." "When was the last time you didn't calculate?" He looked at her. "The beach," he said. "When I walked into the water." Claire held his gaze for a moment longer than the ones before it. Neither looked away this time. "That's it," she said quietly. "That's the whole path. Cold water without thinking first." He didn't answer, but he didn't look away, and this time neither did she. "Claire," he said finally. "Yeah? What are you to us?" Simple question, impossibly large. She thought for a moment. "Right now," she said, "I'm the person who's here. That's already something real. And later? We figure that out later," she said. "Without rushing." "Without rushing," he repeated. They stayed in the kitchen a while longer. The tea went cold. Outside, February wind moved through the bare trees, and the house held the sound of 2 people choosing, quietly and carefully, to stop being quite so alone. March brought Eli's 10th birthday, the first real celebration in that house since before. Nathan had suggested it. Claire had organized it. Gerald had supervised with the contained emotion of someone watching something historic. Small by any measure, Marcus and his parents, Eli's physical therapist who had become something like an older brother, Priya from school who was apparently devastating at chess, and the 4 of them from the house. Chocolate cake, balloons that Eli called excessive but clearly loved, a moment when Marcus and Eli disappeared to the game room and Nathan, instead of calling them back, simply listened to the noise from 2 rooms away and let them go. At the end of the evening, when the guests had left and Eli was half asleep in his chair, Nathan took him to his room, helped him into bed himself, something he had almost always left to Gerald. Eli settled into the blankets with the weight of a child who has had a genuinely good day. "Dad." "Yeah?" "Best birthday." Nathan adjusted the pillow. "Is Claire going to stay?" Eli asked. "Do you want her to?" "Yes." The uncomplicated certainty that only children manage. "And you do, too. Even though you haven't said it yet." Nathan didn't answer, smoothed the edge of the blanket. "Sleep," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." Eli yawned. "Okay, but don't take too long. I'm impatient." Nathan smiled in the dark of his son's room. "I know," he said. "I've always known that about you." That night Nathan came downstairs and found Claire washing the last of the party glasses. She heard him and kept washing. "He's asleep," Nathan said. "I heard. He said something." Claire let the water run. "What did he say?" Nathan stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, then walked across the room, took a dish towel from the hook, and started drying the glass she'd just rinsed. "That I want you to stay," he said, "even though I haven't said it." Claire stopped washing. They looked at each other. "What you just said," she said quietly, "was saying it." Nathan held her gaze. One moment without any calculation in it. "Yeah," he said. "I guess it was." Claire picked up the next glass and didn't look away. Then, she said, "I think I'm going to stay." And in that kitchen, in that house that had been the quietest house on the quietest street in Ridgemont, Connecticut for 3 years, something finished opening, not loudly, not quickly, with the gentleness of something that had been growing since the first morning, slowly, without announcing itself, building roots before there was anything visible above the surface. Not everything was resolved. Not everything would be, not soon. Nathan would still have hard nights. Eli would still have days when what he'd lost felt heavier than what he had. Claire would still be the person who had walked into the middle of all of it and chosen to stay without anyone asking her to. But that night, with clean glasses and the smell of birthday cake still in the air, the 3 of them had found something no conduct policy could have included, the possibility of being together a little more whole than alone. And sometimes that is exactly enough to begin. Loving someone isn't preventing them from falling. It's being there when they do. It's reaching out without asking why. It's walking beside them, even when the road has turns nobody could have anticipated. Nathan learned that too late for Sarah, and just in time for Eli. Eli learned it from Claire without realizing he was learning anything at all. And Claire had known it for years, from her mother's kitchen, from the nights she had understood that love that stays quiet doesn't stop being love. 3 people, 1 house that had forgotten how to be loud, and 4 words that were misunderstood at first and understood completely in the end. I'm going to heal you, not your legs, the part inside. Before you go, I need to ask you something real because this story matters to me and you matter more. Would you have given Nathan another chance, or would you have walked away and never looked back? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to read your answer. And if this story landed somewhere real inside you, leave me your rating from 0 to 10. Every number tells me whether I'm on the right path to keep telling stories worth hearing.